Welcome to the In-Between, where shift happens. This podcast is for anybody who has ever found themselves in that space in between what was and what's going to be. That space where life happens. The moment between where we are and where we're going. That space that is often uncomfortable to sit in. The stuff of life, the ups, the downs, the moments of connection and insight, and the moments where we can't see two steps in front of us. We will ask all the questions, maybe find some answers, and generally work at being okay in the mystery of the in-between.
And so today's episode, we are addressing the impact of religious trauma and how we can deconstruct and heal from some of that impact in a way that is supportive for us, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all the things. And so with us, we're so excited. We have the illustrious, we have the beautiful Corabelle Hall, who's going to be sharing our time with us. And so I'm so excited about this conversation, Corabelle. So excited.
Yes, I am too. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am so honored to be here and, talk on this subject because it's something that we definitely need to bring light to.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, kind of the way we do this is I'm going to have some questions that kind of guide our conversation, and Corabelle does not know any of these questions. And so we're practicing what we preach and kind of living in that in-between, that mystery, that like kind of not knowing. So this is kind of a practical way to do that. But so let's get it started, right? Because there's so much that we can talk about in this topic. And so Corabelle, I would love for you to introduce yourself and maybe speak a little bit about why this topic of religious trauma is near and dear to you in some of your work in this area.
Well, thank you. Thank you. My name's Corabelle, she, they pronouns. And I say this because you might not always know by my appearance and the external. I reside in Kentucky and have been a Kentuckian my entire life, born and raised. And growing up, I had a very wonderful family that was loving and supportive of everything that I did. And we were always in church. And anytime the door was open, we were always there. And it just felt like one of those places that was just home, and it was just a natural space. Well, as I started getting older and going through the changes, as they say in The Giver, it's like, I started to realize that I was unique and I was special and I was quote unquote different than any of the other kids. And that basically meant that I was gay or I was a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Because I say gay because I had two coming out experiences. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, cool.
So it's like, I had that part of me where this feeling inside of me was starting to go against the teachings of this Southern Baptist principle, like the principles of, the Southern Baptist. So, I lived in a lot of shame and a lot of fear. Also, I had a lot of, how should I put this, challenges come my way, especially with me wanting to live authentically, but not knowing how. And it almost felt like I would go to church and I would hear one thing, but yet my heart and the way I wanted to express was another thing. And it was just completely being defeated. So I went into my college years and I don't want to say I got a little wild, but hey, I got a little wild. We all do. And we experiment and we explore and we try to find what fits. And so coming through that, I realized that this family and this home and this sacred space that I once knew that I thought was always going to be there was no longer there.
Mm.
Because now I have come out as a gay man, a gay individual. But then it was quite, how should I put this? It was quite interesting to see a few years later whenever I discovered that I am not this gay individual, that I am a non-binary individual, and that there is power in this divine masculine, this divine feminine. But the thing is it took me all of these years, and I say all of that to say it took me all of these years. I'm 33 to get to where I am today because I've only been living, I don't want to say living, I've been living as myself my entire life, but I
Mm.
have only been authentically living. God, I don't even want to say authentically living. I just want to,
We
we're
know what
all
you mean.
authentically
Yeah,
living. You
yeah,
know
we
what I
know.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I've only vocalized being non-binary and stating myself as non-binary to the world for a year and a half. And it's like, I am 33, and it's so sad because I lived in such guilt and such fear and such shame. And it was like, I felt like there was a sense of rejection, almost as if, even though I was doing all of these things and following all of the protocols that the church wanted and thinking that I was following the spiritual path, how am I still damned to hell? How am I still this bad individual? How am I still not good enough?
Yeah.
And so that perpetuated a whole people pleasing road for me and trying to make sure that I am doing things to fit in. But then I have realized recently doing the things that make me stand out are actually helping other people understand and helping other people
Mhm.
become motivated. So it's like taking that thinking of, I don't want to say playing the victim in this, but using that religious trauma to empower me to move forward and say, I'm not going to let religion or spirituality be the problem here because it's
Right.
not. It's
Right.
the people and the environment and the places and the situations that we get into that we start to feel those those fears
Right.
come come
Well,
up.
and I think you're speaking a lot to, like, representation, like, the representation, and it's interesting, we have very similar
Mm,
stories, even though I'm just a tad bit older than you. But,
just a tish. I mean,
this
25 never looks so good, right?
for sure. Um, but, I grew up, my dad's a minister, Methodist minister, and just grew up in this sort of this understanding, this teaching that you do the right things and you get heaven, right? It's like this weird sort of, um, I don't know, kind of like slot machine sort of, put in the right thing and you're gonna get the right result. Um, and I think for me, my because I also had 2 coming out stories and have been, verbalizing my non-binary identity for about 3 years now, and so, yeah, the amount of shame and the disentanglement from some of that, um, those ideals, those things that were pressed upon me, it has been an interesting detangling. I call it, the divine dismantling. It's been a divine dismantling of, the expectations and the anger and the shame and the like being disowned and all those things that were pressed upon me. It's like this untangling that and really allowing those things to fall to the wayside. And so, um, what do you think? I know that you work, that you actually lead a support group for individuals who have maybe had similar experiences of our own, and have experienced less than supportive reactions from their religious communities and whatnot, based on how they express themselves and their identity. What, like in your work, like what do you see as like these long-term impacts of these religious traumatic experiences in like in the individuals that you're interacting with? What are some of like the
I I know that from personal experience, some of these ideals and some of these belief systems that have been um, that I've been conditioned to have often led me down the path of suicidal ideation
Mm,
and suicidality. Also, just a lot of, I keep saying like that shame and that regret. And, when an individual lives in that feeling for so long and they are trying to escape, it's almost as if they feel suffocated
mhm,
and that the life is just being taken out of them because they it's almost like they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. Um, but I say all of that because the biggest thing that I have seen is these individuals that invoke the religious trauma are, and I don't even want to say these individuals, it it's just these ideas that have been present.
right.
It's being it is being so ingrained in these kids and in me, or it was, that I was not good enough
Mm,
and that I have to strive, I have to work, I have to continue to do things. But it's how this is you've gooped me. You have gooped me today. Because it's like I want to use my personal experience, but I also like want to speak to the collective because it's
yeah,
like, I because I know like my reality isn't the same, but like we're all working on this together. So it's like being able to understand that the words we say from the pulpit and the words that we say in these little classes at the Sunday night church or at the potluck, even, they have an
mm,
impact.
yeah,
And like the intention behind the things, the intention behind some of these ceremonies, like they all have an impact. And it's so sad to me that there are other individuals, even some of the clients that I see that are like me, that are afraid to speak up on issues. They are afraid to advocate for themselves. They are also looking for this sense of, how should I put it, like masculine, like divine, like need, like, but it's almost like a disconnect of not
mhm,
realizing your own potential and not
mm,
understanding that you have everything that you need within you and that the spiritual act and the spiritual principles are taking the the words and putting them into action,
yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just kind of feel it. I feel it in my cells when you're just talking about worthiness. For me, in my own personal experience, and I don't think that it's just unique to me, but it was that, and it's not to say that, you know, religion is bad. I mean, this is not what we're talking about, but we're talking about this, honestly, this weaponized use of religion. It's this weaponization of religion, spirituality, anything in that realm, to say you've got to do this or you're not good enough, or you've got to do it this way or you're not worthy enough, or you've got to say it,
Mhm.
you've got to express yourself, you've got to fit in this box, or you just don't belong here, right? And so I have been in situations, especially like in spiritual leadership, where I was asked to step down because how I showed up as who I am, my identity, my gender expression, did not fit in that box, and it was not according to the rules or whatever rules that were deemed, and I was asked to step down from leadership. And so I think that for me, it has felt like this weaponized use of religion in order to directly impact someone's worthiness. And so that we have to, like, put in the right formula, show up the right way, wear the right clothes, say the right things, identify the right way, and then we get to reap all of the benefits of whatever, and that's just not how it works. I mean, I personally, um, wouldn't want to worship or be in relationship with a divine entity that did that, right? And so I think that what you said is like right. I mean, the intent may not be there, but the impact, wow, the impact is just like I don't even know. I can't even express
Mhm.
just the collective impact that has. Because
Mhm.
then we really rob ourselves of basking in the full expression of each other because we're not allowing that. And wow, I mean, what better place for us to be able to do that than spiritual communities?
Period. And it's like I was at a conference last year, and one of the keynotes was talking about religious trauma and actually made a beautiful metaphor to kind of help put things into perspective. And it's like the moon is spirituality and religion. And we are all down here pointing towards the moon. But sometimes we get stuck looking at each other's finger and fingernails, thinking we're looking at the moon because we're not able to look beyond.
Mm,
And it's like we're still pointing, but it's like being able to look beyond what is right there in front of you and seeing the bigger picture.
yeah,
And it's as if like being able to foster these spaces now, like within these spiritual centers, has been so nice because it creates that environment of safety where like change can be cultivated, understanding can be cultivated. Um, and it's like I think the most powerful thing from my religious trauma group that I've been leading and seeing is that no matter what denomination, faith, culture, background, it's still present. And it's present across all religions,
yeah.
all spiritual paths, all walks of life. And it's like being able to open up the dialogue and, create this space to, educate, but empower and help bridge these perspectives to understand that we're all just trying to make it through life. We are all trying to carry each other. I can't remember who said that quote. We're all just walking each other home. I
Ram
love
Dass,
that quote.
Ram Dass, yeah,
Yes, like that is so like that's so true
yeah.
because even though difficulties may arise, if you're able to face the conflict and face these these troubles, head on and be vocal about it and own your truth, it's like it might open up more room to grow,
Mm,
you know?
I love that.
Because I feel like that's one of the things that has been so hard about religious trauma is it seems so taboo.
Mm,
And it's like religion is all around us. Spirituality is all around us. It's essentially part of us. And, from the beginning of time, we've been looking for a sense of purpose. We have been looking to see where we have come from, where we are going. And it's like taking the time to look at each individual and knowing that they are essentially that reflection of you and allowing yourself to sit in that discomfort and really process and say, where are these feelings coming from? Is this in tune with the morals and the belief systems of my religious trauma, or can I recreate that and make those into a more diverse set of foundational belief systems? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Mm. And I think that I think that we hold on, and I say we because, I mean, I have my own, like, spiritual beliefs now, and I have to be careful. I have to be careful sometimes that I don't hold so tightly to things, that I don't create this, either or thinking. It has to be this way or this way, or it has to be this particular way, right? And so I think it really calls us to really, um kind of redefine how our relationship to spirituality and our spiritual beliefs, that it's not, it's not this. And I think this is what happens sometimes in certain religious settings, is we have a set of beliefs and we're sticking with it and we don't care what shows up. This is what we believe and we're not going to do anything different. And there is, and I will say, there is a safety in that. I'm a rule follower. I like to know what's expected of me, and I like to know the boundaries in which I can kind of play and live. And so I understand the leaning towards that, but that's not how life shows up.
Mm,
And so I think the call is, it's not to abandon all spiritual beliefs or abandon all religion or anything like that. I think the call is to have a different relationship with those entities, those institutions, those beliefs, and to hold them with, I don't know, like, very light fingers. Like, hold these systems of belief very lightly, because then it gives us an opportunity when we come in contact with individuals who may not believe like we are, or show up like we are, or identify like we do, and we're like, "Huh, there's room for you. I can just lightly kind of open my arms a little bit more," right? And so I think that that I think that is the thing that is so traumatic, or has been for me, because the kind of the strict guidelines in which I lived in, or I was raised in, there was no room for me because I didn't
mm.
fit in that. And so I think the more we lean into people, the more we ask questions, the more we look closely at people. Brene Brown says it's hard to hate close up, so lean in. And so the
Yes.
more we lean in, the more we realize that life shows up in lots of different ways, and that we can kind of begin to release our grasp on some of these ideas and beliefs that can be damaging for people.
Yes, and I love that you said that because it is within these spaces that we can create and like cultivate this sense of resilience, and be able to show our community and also anyone else who has been affected by religious trauma that they can like start this journey to work through it and start this journey to heal. And it's like reminding us to, because it's kind of like a call for our own selves to like a call for a collective of like self-empowerment to like
Right.
empower ourselves to become the individuals that we need. But it's, and like, I don't want to say but, and it is a realization that the pain is inevitable. Pain is going to be there. We are going to have these feelings, and but it doesn't, and it see, I keep saying but. It's and resilience and empowerment become like those guiding principles now. So it's like there's this dance between like the polarities and transcending this like binary thinking and embracing the identities of all religions and spirituality and, painting a vivid picture of the beautiful kaleidoscope that we have here within our human experience, and like out of religious trauma can become a beautiful painting
Yeah.
because it's like that's how I got here. That's how I got into the mental health field. It was my religious trauma that helped empower me and helped me see that there is a need for this. There is a need for change. There is a need for non binary individuals to be in this field to help cultivate this change, but also to help say, I see you. I may not have been there in that exact moment at that exact time when this and this happened, but we're right here. We're walking down the same road. And if I can hold your hand or just be there on the sideline saying, you got this, then I'm going to do it.
Right.
Because in essence, that's what my faith was trying to teach me all along as a kid. You know what I mean? But it got a little tainted. I'll say that. And I'll leave it at that. But it's like, that's what it is. Like being able to see the similarities and not competing
Right.
because there's a wholeness and a oneness and being able to create this understanding of essentially universal love.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in this conversation too, I think there is a tendency to want to kind of like bury this conversation of religious
Mhm.
trauma because we don't really we're uncomfortable, I think, with sometimes the word trauma and uncomfortable with um how that kind of shows up. But I think that the more that we can, I don't know what you think about this, but I think the more that we can have these conversations and say, yeah, these things happened in this religious community, these words, these things that were told to me or to you or to anybody that really attacked their worth or made them feel less than is traumatic. It's traumatic to the expression of that individual. And so I think that to not be afraid to talk about that. To not be afraid
Mhm.
to talk about that, just among ourselves, but also in our religious communities, not be afraid to talk about saying, "Hey, we recognize the historical impact of some of these things." And we can
Mhm.
recognize that, we can hold that, and then also hold the vision for how we can begin to transform these spaces so that those things don't continue. And so what would you say, um, are some ways that as spiritual communities we could actually transform the historical maybe some of the historical damage that's been done to individuals and that those traumas, like how can we what are some simple things that we can do to really begin to shift and create these spaces, these communities that recognize the impact and then begin to kind of deconstruct and then reconstruct from that.
Mm. So, I think that one of the biggest things that we have to do first is take responsibility. We must take responsibility for the actions and the behaviors and the things that we have said, and also understanding our part within the religious trauma. By saying that, I'm not saying taking responsibility for the trauma itself.
Mhm.
I'm saying taking responsibility for moving your life forward. And one of the biggest things that I hear a lot of people say is like, let go, let God. And we would love to think that. That
Right.
sounds wonderful, doesn't it?
It sounds lovely.
And in that, it's like, where's the responsibility? Where is the creativity that you are able to gain from having those interactions with your creator or the divine or spirit by taking responsibility for the parts of the trauma within your life and creating to spaces and helping to advocate for others with that, because a year ago, when I created the religious trauma support group here in Kentucky, I was nervous, but now it's grown, and by seeing that these spaces that are being created are allowing more and more people to come and show up
Yeah.
and have the chance to share. And another thing that I found very powerful is that sharing and getting the trauma out. There's this book a lot of psychologists love. It's The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know if you read it,
Yeah.
but it is.
Yeah.
It's like our body does keep the score, like with trauma, and like by releasing it and even vocalizing it and letting it out, it does so much good for you and for your body, and it allows your body to say, okay, I've acknowledged this, it wasn't my fault, but here's what I can do, and here's how I can be proactive.
Yeah.
Also, I think another powerful thing to do with anyone who is suffering or going through religious trauma, if if you don't know what to say, just stand by them. Like, just showing up and being present, um, because that's putting your action and your words into action. I mean,
Right.
and it's showing that you care. Because I will say, the way we speak and our diction and our language can sometimes be a little intimidating. And also, if you're coming into a religion or a culture or a spiritual context that you're not familiar with, it's okay to just sit by the individual and be there with them and help support them. Because that's the thing that, we're at the end of the day, everybody puts their pants on the same way. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
We're all
Right.
the same. And that's where, if we can take that time to be in the present and see the other individual as ourself, and see them as an expression of love, then that's how we can start this conversation of religious trauma
Yeah.
and start to propel a change. Um, because I will say they have been working for years now to get religious trauma within the DSM-5. That's the
Right.
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of psychiatric disorders. But it's like it's still not being presented and acknowledged. So we've got a lot of work to do behind this. Um, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, we're glad you're a part of it. And kind of what struck me in having been a psychotherapist and dealt with clients who really expressed some of the impact of some of religious upbringings and how that really impacted their self-worth and how they showed up. And even in my own experience, there were times where I kind of disengaged from like my spirituality for large chunks of my life because of that. And I think that what's interesting about that is that we are, the whole of us is, physical and mental and emotional and spiritual, like this whole view of well-being. And by some of these traumatic experiences or people being in experiences where they feel less than because of how they show up in a religious community, it like takes that big chunk of expression away. And for me, it took a big chunk away. And so I think that the more that we can create spaces or spiritual communities or religious communities where we can re-engage people with that chunk, for lack of a better word, wow, how powerful that can that be? Because we know there's so many parts of us, and when we can't express one part, it feels kind of funky. And so to be able to create spaces where people can express themselves fully, they can show up uh, as they are and express their physical, mental, emotional, spiritual selves in ways that are expansive and not ways that are limiting. That I think that we see the collective impact of creating, sometimes we have these little pockets of spaces that we create, and they're like, what's the impact of this, right? We're not really impacting anything. But imagine groups of people now empowered to live authentically in all aspects of themselves. And then imagine they go out in the world and they do that. And then by doing that, they invite other people to do that. And then other people, and then other people. And then we create this like collective like movement toward self-expression in all aspects. I mean, I just think the collective impact is amazing. And just even the work that you're doing, right? Your support group, and just imagine that's empowering people and
Right.
empowering
And
people.
it's those little ripples. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I love. And, because in the support group has grown because now, actually this month, we've rebranded because I realized in the very beginning when I created the support group, I named it Crossed. And at first I thought it was great. I was like, yeah, I love this. This is great. But then I started thinking about like the intention
Mm,
and like where I was coming from when I created the group. And it's like I wanted it to be a support group, but then I was also like, I felt very crossed. And so
mm,
I'm going to define this. But then I was like, no, I do not want to put that into the world because that's still putting some of my negative feelings towards spirituality and religion into the world. So I took a leap, rebranded, and now we have been able to create a space that's going to be at our local spiritual center and also our local, one of our local mental health counseling centers. And it's going to be virtual as well. And it's called the 604 Roundabout. And it's basically a compassionate religious trauma support group that is just fostering and transcending these traditional boundaries
mm,
by embracing omni faith,
mm.
um, like an omni faith understanding
Right,
of all
right.
faiths, all spirituality. And then there's this talk behind 604 symbolizing it's an angel number because I gotta throw a little stuff in there.
Right, right.
But it's an angel number and it represents recreating one's core beliefs.
Mm.
And I was like,
Love that.
oh, right, because it's like, this is a space for individuals to look at those complexities surrounding their religious trauma and be able to create a new foundation. And of course, the term roundabout, that's where people can come in to this circle, participate, take what they need, and embark on their own path of healing from the religious trauma. And it's just by vocalizing it and me taking the step a year and a half ago to vocalize it, look, this has been created.
Mm.
And this has been created here within our community of Kentucky. Imagine if other people in other communities did the exact same thing that I did and
Right.
vocalized, you know? And this is just one of the many ways we can educate on this issue. There's many paths, but
Yeah.
it's like being able to take the discomfort, take the trauma, turn it into your superpower, and utilize it to help advocate for those that can't. Because we're all one, and injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. So,
Drop the mic on that one. I love that. I love that. Yeah,
Oh,
and I love that you're like, I mean, you have created if you can create it in Kentucky, you can create it anywhere, right?
right. Because I was
That's
like,
beautiful.
listen, we're a red state. God, if it could be created here, damn,
It's
honey.
beautiful, beautiful. I love the work that you're doing. All right. So, I'd love for you to end on if you could tell if you could say one thing to anyone out there who has been impacted by religious trauma, or anyone who has been told that they were less than by a community of faith or a religious community because of who they are. If you could tell them one thing, what would it be?
I would say you are a beautiful and you are a beautiful universe of potential, and each little star within you holds a brilliance of worth and uniqueness, and you are indeed a worthy contribution to this world
Mm, beautiful.
because ooh, you deserve love, and no one can take that away from you but you. So I also say, I love you and I believe in you. And so it is.
And so it is.
Ooh, girl.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Corabelle, for sharing your brilliance, sharing your sparkle, um, and for the amazing work that you're doing in the world, and for uh, being that representation that often so many of us didn't have. And so we appreciate that. And so
Thank
thank you
you.
for joining us. And we will continue to wade through this in between that life is, right? That in between of where we are and where we're going. And sometimes that's uncomfortable, but that's okay. Comfort isn't the goal. And so until next time, we will see you in the in between.
Nobody really enjoys being in the in-between, but thanks for being here anyway. We may not have found all of the answers, but certainly some, and maybe more importantly, a little shift has happened. Because that is really what it's all about, learning to be curious, authentic, and yes, maybe even a tad bit vulnerable. And the beauty of it all is that we are not alone in the in-between. So until next time, we hope a lot of shift happens.